A poor woman discovers a photo of herself in the drawer of a millionaire's desk. When she hears him enter, she hides and hears something that leaves her paralyzed. Eleanor was in absolute silence in Mr. Thomas Rivera's office. Her hands trembled as she wiped the luxurious mahogany furniture. She knew she shouldn't be there, and much less at that hour. It was too late to be in the office of the powerful businessman, but at that moment, her restless fingers guided her. The role of a cleaner had never put her in such a compromising place. While cleaning the company's hallways, Elena had heard something that made her stop in the middle of her work. Two employees were discussing in low voices confidential documents belonging to Thomas Rivera. Their names were mentioned in the middle of the conversation, but what really made her shudder was the whisper, "Elena Castro." She stood still, absorbing the impact of those words. Why would Mr. Thomas have documents with her name on them? A wave of curiosity mixed with fear washed over her, and she couldn't help but approach the office. With her heart beating fast, Eleanor knew she shouldn't go any further, but something was urging her. She began to open the desk drawers, one by one, with trembling fingers. The sound of the wood creaking under her touch seemed deafening, but she couldn't stop. In the last drawer, an old folder awaited her, yellowed with age. When she opened it, her world stopped for a moment. Inside, there was a photograph, and Eleanor recognized it immediately. It was a picture of her, still very young, holding a little girl in her arms. The sight of that image made her recoil instantly, feeling a deep pain. That girl, so innocent, so full of life, seemed lost forever. But there she was, again before her. Her tears began to blur her vision, and her fingers gently touched the outline of the photograph as if she were afraid it would disappear again. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted her reverie. Voices were getting closer, and Eleanor heard one of them clearly. It was unmistakable. Thomas Rivera. Panic seized her completely. Without thinking, she ran and hid behind the heavy curtain that covered the office windows, clutching the photograph to her chest. Thomas's footsteps echoed firmly on the marble floor, followed by a female voice. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the woman asked, and Eleanor recognized her as Paula, Thomas's personal assistant. Thomas answered in a voice filled with an emotion Eleanor had never heard from him before. "I have no choice, Paula. I have kept this secret for too long. Elena has a right to know the truth about her daughter." The words fell on Elena like a blow. "Your daughter?" What did that mean? She could barely process the revelation. The secret that Thomas Rivera had kept for so long was about to be exposed. Eleanor felt her heart pound so hard, it felt like it was about to explode. "But revealing this now could destroy everything we've built," Thomas murmured, his voice cracking with guilt. Paula insisted. "You built all this, Thomas." "I know," he replied, emotion making his voice brittle. "But I can't live with this anymore. What I did, what we allowed to happen." The words were like knives cutting into Eleanor's soul. What did Thomas know about his daughter? What was the guilt he carried? And what were those documents hiding? Suddenly, the sound of drawers being frantically opened and closed filled the air. "Maria! The documents are gone!" Thomas cried out in alarm. Chest tight, Elena hugged the photograph to her body, feeling the weight of each word. She knew she had crossed a line of no return. Thomas's secret was intimately linked to the deepest pain of her life, and now, behind that curtain, she was about to discover a truth that would change everything. The footsteps came dangerously close to the curtain. Elena closed her eyes, trying to control the panic that was taking hold of her. Her heart was pounding so hard she was afraid everyone in the building could hear it. The door opened and closed with a bang, and Thomas's voice sounded strained. "Okay, I'm going over there." The footsteps receded. When the room finally fell silent, Elena opened her eyes. Her life had changed forever. With trembling hands, she put the photograph in her pocket. Now, she was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a woman searching for answers, determined to discover the truth that Thomas Rivera had kept hidden for all those years. She would not rest until she understood what really happened to her daughter and what that terrible secret had to do with her life. That night, Elena could not sleep. Sitting on the floor of her small kitchen, under the dim light of a lamp, she remained there, motionless, staring at the photograph, with a lost gaze. Her fingers, trembling, traced the contours of the image over and over, as if trying to feel the warmth of a moment that seemed lost in time. Little Maria, her daughter, smiled at the camera with the innocence that only children possess. That smile, radiant and full of life, was the last thing Elena saw before her life changed forever. Thomas's words echoed in her mind, like an unbearable echo. Elena has the right to know the truth about her daughter. But what truth was that? What did Thomas know? What had he done without her knowing? The pain she thought she had buried so many years ago was now resurfacing with devastating force. And in that moment, Elena felt she was about to unearth something much bigger than she had imagined. The next morning, Elena woke up and prepared for another day of work, but with a feeling of apprehension that followed her like a shadow. She knew that sooner or later she would have to face Thomas Rivera, the man who kept a secret that she was not supposed to know. When she arrived at the company building, everything seemed different. The hallways she had cleaned for so many years, those same hallways, now held a mystery that consumed her. "Elena, are you okay?" The voice of Wendy, her cleaning partner, made her shiver. "You look pale." "I'm okay," Elena lied, forcing a smile. "I just didn't sleep well." She tried to concentrate as she walked through the hallways of the executive floor, her eyes searching Thomas's every move. She saw him arrive early, as usual, but something was different about him. He seemed distracted, restless, and several times she saw him shuffling papers on his desk, probably looking for the folder Elena had found the previous morning. As Elena was cleaning the windows, she overheard a conversation coming from Paula's office, Thomas's assistant. Her words hit her like a blow. "We can't go on like this," Paula said, her voice tense. "Sophia is asking questions. She says she found old documents in her mother's house." "Sophia? Have you seen her?" Thomas replied, worried. "She came to my office yesterday. She's looking into your past. Paula, she'll find out the truth sooner or later." Eleanor's heart raced. What did Thomas know about his daughter? What did he have to do with her story? What did it all mean? The cleaning cloth fell from Eleanor's hands. Paula's words hit her like a slap. Protect her. Give her a better life. Now, everything was starting to make sense. The pieces of a terrible puzzle were falling into place in a terrifying way. It was Wendy who brought her back to reality. "The 19th floor needs urgent cleaning. There was a spill in the conference room," she said, interrupting Elena's whirlwind of thoughts. Elena nodded automatically, trying to compose herself. Yes, of course. But as she worked, her mind kept racing. If what she had heard was true, if the suspicions she had about what was happening were really true, she needed answers. Lots of answers. In the late afternoon, when the flow of employees had slowed and the office was emptier, Elena knew it was time. She needed to go to the company's general archives, a place she had cleaned hundreds of times but had never really explored. It was a maze of metal shelves, each loaded with folders and documents. Elena searched the oldest section where records from years ago were kept. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through folder after folder, searching for something that might finally connect Thomas to her life and her daughter's story. After a long time, Elena's heart nearly stopped when her eyes fell on a yellow envelope, weathered with age. It sat there, right on the shelf of old documents. The name Thomas Rivera was clearly visible on the label. Whatever was inside this envelope, it surely had something to do with the secret Thomas was keeping. With shaking hands, Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents, all signed by Thomas Rivera, with him listed as the interested party in the adoption process. The dates matched perfectly with her daughter's disappearance. And even more frightening, there were photographs. Photographs of a little girl growing up in a luxurious home. The girl was none other than young Sofia Rivera. Eleanor was shocked. She read one of the documents and felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. What did Thomas know about his daughter? What had he done? And why was she only finding out about all this now? Eleanor's world seemed to fall apart as the answers finally began to reveal themselves. The reunion between mother and daughter was an overwhelming moment, marked by a mix of deep feelings and unspoken words. Eleanor, with the photograph of her little Maria in her hands, had finally found the courage to confront the man who, for so long, had been a constant presence in her life, but invisibly. Ulysses, with his empire built on secrets, watched helplessly as his daughter, now a grown woman, connected with the woman he had driven from her life. The truth, which had been hidden for years, now emerged before everyone like an avalanche. Sofia, her eyes full of questions, felt a mixture of anger and pain. How could she have been deceived for so many years, believing that her biological mother had abandoned her, when in reality she was there, close to her every day, in the same room, but without ever being able to touch her? The pain of losing her childhood, the moments that could have been shared, was something that could not be erased. Ulysses finally revealed the reason for his actions, a failed attempt to justify his decision to separate mother and daughter. He believed he was protecting Sofia, giving her a better life, but what he did not understand was that love cannot be measured by social status or money. A mother's love for her daughter is unconditional and immeasurable, and no material luxury could replace Elena's affection and presence in her daughter's life. Upon hearing her mother's words, Sofia began to understand the magnitude of what she had lost, but also how much her mother had never forgotten her. The delicate touch on her cheek, the tears that now flowed freely, were the beginning of a new chapter for them, a journey of reconstruction, recognition, and healing. Ulysses, no matter how hard he tried, knew he could not fix what he had done. The weight of guilt was unbearable, and his empire of lies was crumbling before his eyes. But perhaps, for the good of all, it was time to face the consequences of his actions and allow the truth and love of a mother and daughter to finally blossom. The silence that followed was dense, but full of unspoken meanings. Mother and daughter, now facing each other, had much to discover, much to rebuild. The road ahead would be long, but at least now the truth was in sight, and with it, the chance to finally live the life they were always meant to live. Sofia's words echoed in the heavy silence between mother and daughter, like a painful confession that released years of pain and loss. The pain that Eleanor had felt all those years of separation seemed to be reflected in the eyes of her daughter, who now an adult, tried to understand the complexity of the emotions that united them. For so many years, Sofia had had everything that money could offer, but now she understood, bitterly, that the real lack in her life was not a material issue. It was the absence of her mother's love, the embrace that never materialized. Elena, with her heart heavy and tears threatening to fall again, felt the sadness of a past that could not be changed. She had given everything she had to survive, to give as little as possible to her daughter. But, unintentionally, she had lost the most important thing, the opportunity to be a real mother, to care for and protect her daughter closely. Now, in front of Sofia, she tried to rebuild what she had never had the chance to experience. The silence between them stretched for long minutes, as if the weight of the truth was too great to be digested immediately. But at the same time, there was a faint sense of hope. Perhaps it would be possible to rebuild somehow the bond that had been torn apart by so many years of separation and secrets. Eleanor knew that nothing could erase the lost years, but the truth was now in plain sight, and the truth, however painful it might be, could finally free them both from the weight of their past anguish. "I'm so sorry, daughter," Eleanor said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I just wanted you to know the truth, to know how much I loved you and how much it hurt me to see you all these years so close, but at the same time so far away." Sophia, her face full of tears, answered softly, "I know, Mom. I know." She looked at Elena with a look that mixed sadness and understanding. "Now, at least, we have the chance to start over. Together." And there, at that small coffee table, in the silence that followed, mother and daughter finally understood each other. The love that had once seemed lost was now beginning to be reborn, despite the scars left by the years. The past, with all its lies and omissions, could no longer be ignored. But the possibility of a future together, the chance to build a new relationship, was all they had left. And that would be the first step to healing the wounds, to rediscovering what it meant to be mother and daughter, to finally living the truth they had longed for. Sophia and Elena's words mingled together at that moment, like promises of a new beginning, where love and truth could finally flourish, free from everything that had imprisoned them until then. The silence in the cafe was heavy, but also charged with a new feeling, a mixture of pain and hope. Ulysses, faced with the harsh reality of what he had done, seemed small, dejected, with his eyes filled with regret. He had tried to justify his actions, but none of that could erase the years that he and his wife had taken from Elena and Sophia. The guilt he felt seemed to be immortalized in every line of his face, as if the weight of all those wrong choices had finally broken his facade. Sophia, still with her eyes moist, took the lead, which surprised both mother and father. Despite everything, she demonstrated a strength that they had not seen before. Ulysses, observing his daughter, understood that his mission to give her a better life had been a colossal mistake. He had tried to shape her life with the idea that she would be in a better environment, but he had forgotten the essential. A mother's love cannot be replaced by money or power. When Ulysses handed her the documents, the originals of the adoption that he believed would be a solution, Elena looked at them, but knew that nothing there could give her back what she had lost. She didn't want papers. She didn't want any more formal records. She wanted the moments she had never lived, the years of loss that, even with the best material resources, could never be recovered. "I want the years you stole from me," Elena said, the pain in her words cutting through the air. "I want the first words, the first steps, the nightmares and the dreams. I want the hugs I could never give, the kisses I could never share. Can you give them back to me?" Ulysse lowered his head, helplessness taking over his body. But Sophia, with the wisdom that life had given her, intervened. She understood what was at stake now. "We can't change the past," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But we can build a future where I don't have to choose between my two families, where I don't have to pretend I don't feel the way I do when I see my mother cleaning the floor at the company." These words, spoken with such sincerity, touched Elena deeply, and she felt a love for her daughter that she thought she had lost forever. Sophia had grown, not only physically, but emotionally. She had the strength of the mother she had lost, but also the kindness of the father who had adopted her. The bond between them, though worn by time, had not been broken. Ulysses, defeated, understood the magnitude of what he had done and the pain he had caused. "I'm going to give you two some space," he said, preparing to leave the room. But before he could, Elena stopped him. She knew she needed one last word, one last reflection on what was happening here. "You used your power to destroy my life, to steal the only thing that mattered to me," Eleanor said, looking directly into Ulysses's eyes. "But you also created a wonderful person. You gave her opportunities that I might not have given her, and for that, I will try to find a way to forgive you, not for you, but for her." Tears began to fall down Ulysses's face, something he had not done until then. He knew he did not deserve Eleanor's forgiveness, but at least he understood that his daughter deserved to have peace. Sophia, touched by her mother's sincerity, stood up and hugged her. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. Then she turned to Ulysses. "You too, Dad. Thank you for loving me, even if it was the wrong way." And there, in those last moments in the cafe, the words were more than enough. Ulysses left, but the echo of his words and the choices he had made remained. But now, for Eleanor and Sophia, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Rebuilding trust, healing wounds, and finding peace would be a long road, but it had already begun. Eleanor looked out the window, watching the city awaken to a new day. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small flame of hope ignite within her chest. The young mother who, so many years ago, had lost everything, was now beginning to find the peace that had eluded her for so long. The new beginning was uncertain, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where love and truth could finally coexist. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Elena was back to her old habits, cleaning the hallways of the company where she had worked for so many years. But now, everything seemed different. The truth that had been kept secret for so long had finally come to light, and with it, the revelation of something that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Her little Maria, her daughter, had returned, but in a different way, transformed. She was no longer the little girl Elena had lost, but Sofia Rivera, with the same heart as before, with the same memories, but with a new identity. The day that changed everything seemed like a long time ago, but it was still fresh in Elena's memory. Helena, her daughter, knew how much every moment of suffering had been worth it, because in the end, love had found its way back. "What happened now, Mom?" Helena asked, with a tone of concern, but also of relief as she watched Eleanor clean the office windows. Wendy, her cleaning partner, was quick to approach. She had already heard the gossip spread through the halls, the story that Elena was Sofia Rivera's biological mother, a famous, rich, and powerful woman. "Why are you still here?" Wendy asked, with a curious expression. "Now that everyone knows the truth, you could demand compensation for everything you went through. You could live without working." Elena stopped for a moment and looked at her reflection in the window. The years of struggle, the tireless work, everything she had done to get closer to her daughter could never be repaid with money. "Money can't make up for the lost years," she replied with a softness that touched the soul. "This work has kept me close to her all these years. I won't abandon it now." Meanwhile, at the Rivera mansion, Sophia was facing her own demons. The night before, she had had a tense dinner with her uncles and cousins. Her Aunt Mercedes' words echoed in the room, sharp as blades. "You're naive, Sophia. Can't you see that she only wants to take advantage of the situation?" Mercedes said, stirring her wineglass impatiently. "She's not trustworthy. She's an opportunist." "The only opportunist here is you, Aunt," Sophia replied, standing up from the table, anger exploding in her voice. "Elena had an opportunity to expose us to the world, to create a scandal, but she remained silent, wiping the ground where I walked, just to watch me grow up." But Sophia's words found no support. Thomas, her uncle, was caught in a crisis that affected the family's reputation and business. He tried to remain calm, but he knew that the scandal was about to explode. "This isn't just a personal matter, Thomas," one of the directors said at an emergency meeting. "You've put our reputation at risk." Elena's true test would come one cold afternoon when she received an unexpected call. It was Maria, Thomas's wife, with a message that sounded urgent. "I need you to come to the main office." Maria's voice was tense. When Elena arrived, she found Maria sitting behind her desk, pale and visibly nervous. On the desk was an old folder full of documents. "I helped Thomas," Maria began, her voice shaking. "Not just with the adoption papers, I was the one who organized everything, who convinced social services that it was the best thing for the girl." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. Paula, the woman who had always been so kind to her, who had given her work when she needed it most, had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. "Why are you telling me this now?" Elena asked, trying to remain calm even though she knew the revelation would be devastating. "Because it's my fault," Maria replied, tears streaming down her face. "And there's more, much more." With shaking hands, Elena picked up the documents. Each page revealed a new layer of the plot, a dirty game involving powerful people, manipulations, and exchanged favors, all carefully planned to steal her daughter. "Why did you keep this?" Elena asked, pain and anger brimming in her voice. "Because you knew that one day the truth would come out," Maria replied. "And maybe, deep down, you wanted it to come out." At that moment, the door opened, and Sophia walked in, stopping when she saw what was happening there. She looked at the papers, at her mother, and at Paula. Confusion filled her heart. "Mum, what's going on?" Sophia asked, her voice low but full of uncertainty. Paula stood up and spoke calmly. "Your mother needs to know the whole truth," she said, looking directly at Sophia. "You both need to understand what happened." In the hours that followed, in that office, Paula unraveled the complex web of lies and manipulation that had kept mother and daughter apart for so many years. She spoke of how Thomas, desperate for an heir, had used his influence to manipulate the system, how Eleanor had been chosen not only because of her situation, but also because she physically resembled Thomas's deceased wife. A young, poor mother with no resources to fight the system, a girl who could pass for the Rivera's biological daughter, Paula said, shame in her voice. Sophia listened in silence. Her world was crumbling around her, but the pain of years of lies and silence was still far from over. "How many people knew about this?" she asked, disbelief evident in her tone. "Many," Paula replied, "but fear and money buy silence." Elena, documents in hand, stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city stretched out under the night sky, vast and full of untold stories. "Do you know what's the saddest thing, Maria?" Elena said, her voice low. "If Thomas had reached out to me, if he had offered me help instead of stealing my daughter, things could have been so different." Sophia, now at her mother's side, touched her shoulder, trying to reconnect with the woman she now knew was her real mother. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice soft but full of regret. "I know." Paula hesitated for a moment before continuing, as if weighing her words carefully. But finally she spoke. "I was the one who organized everything, the adoption, the forged documents. All of this was done with the help of people inside the system. Thomas didn't know all the details. He trusted me, but there was so much he didn't understand." Elena and Sophia exchanged surprised glances. The revelation had gone even deeper than they had imagined, and now the past was finally being unearthed in its entirety. Elena felt a mixture of anger and disbelief, but at the same time, something inside her seemed to warm. It was as if each word Paula said was a key, unlocking the emotional prison she had held for so long. "I understand," Eleanor murmured, her voice shaky but firm. "But why did you do it, Paula? Why did you help Thomas? Why did you involve us in this game?" Paula looked down at the floor, and her words were soft, almost a whisper. Because I wanted to believe that if things went the way he planned, you and your daughter would be happy. I wanted to believe that somehow we could all win. But now I see that I was just as naive as he was. Sophia, who had remained silent until that moment, finally spoke, the pain evident in her voice. You took my mother away from me, and now you're saying that all of this was because of a dream, a lie. Paula looked at Sophia with a look of regret. I know that nothing I say now will change what happened. I can't turn back time, and I can't fix mistakes. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the truth needs to come out. You have the right to know everything, and maybe, who knows, we can try to start over, even if it's too late. Those words, filled with regret, seemed to finally ease some of the pain that weighed on everyone. But the decision to move on still depended on Elena and Sophia. Now what? Sophia asked, still holding her coffee cup, her mind full of doubts. What should we do with all this? Elena looked at her daughter with an expression of renewed determination. Let's not let anger define our future. Let's use this truth to build something new, something that is real, without lies, and without the weight of the past. We can move forward, Sophia, and that's the most important thing. Sophia nodded slowly, her eyes teary but with a shy smile forming on her lips. Yes, we can start over, together. As the two women embraced, Paula watched in silence, feeling a weight being lifted from her shoulders. Forgiveness was not easy, but it was the path to redemption. And although the past could not be changed, they now had the chance to write a new chapter with the freedom to move forward. Elena turned to Paula and, with a sincere look, said, Thank you for showing us the truth, Paula, and for helping us find the strength to start over. With that, night fell over Eleanor's small apartment. But for mother and daughter, the dawn of a new beginning had arrived, full of promise and new opportunities, far from the shadows of the past. Sophia held the photo for a moment, the weight of the words and the image pressing against her heart. The woman in the photo, Thomas's mother, seemed so far away, a shadow of sadness reflected in her eyes. The letter behind the photo was the final touch, a silent confession of guilt carried over the years. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to understand what Thomas's grandmother felt in that silent moment. She was hurting, wasn't she? Sophia whispered, almost to herself. Elena watched her daughter with a soft gaze, knowing that Sophia was processing something few could understand, a grief that transcended time and guilt. Yes, she was. But there was also love. Love for you, love for Thomas. But a love that was lost in circumstances and past mistakes. Elena replied, her voice low but full of understanding. Paula, who had come closer to observe the scene, touched Sophia lightly on the shoulder. It's hard, but sometimes you have to see things as they are in order to move on. Sophia looked at the photo and the letter, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. But for a moment, something inside her seemed to calm down. She didn't know what the future held for her, but she knew that with her mother and Paula by her side, she would no longer be alone to face whatever came. She was trying to give us a chance, wasn't she? Sophia asked, her words now firmer. Yes, Eleanor replied with a gentle smile. She was trying to give us a chance to start over. For you, for me, for all of us. The three women were silent for a moment, each with their own thoughts, but united in something deeper than words could express. The house by the sea needed renovation, but now it meant something different. It was not just a dilapidated building, but a place where a new beginning could be cultivated. A foundation to support single mothers, an idea Sophia and Elena had already begun to envision. The love that once seemed lost was now turning into something greater, something that could help other women find a way to fight and move forward. as they had. "Let's do this," Sophia said, determination clear in her voice. "Let's make this a refuge, a place where the pain of the past can heal and new hope can be born." Elena smiled, feeling certainty grow within her. "Yes, we will. For us, and for all the women who will need a place where they can be strong and have the chance we didn't have." As the three women looked out at the house by the sea, something inside them lit up. It was the promise of a new journey, full of challenges, but also of healing and hope. And so, as the sun began to set, the future finally seemed within reach. Sophia watched her mother, her face serious, examining every detail of the cases presented. Eleanor was immersed in the stories, absorbing each account with quiet determination. For her, this wasn't just about fulfilling a mission, but about ensuring that no mother would have to face what she herself had faced, alone and without support. Sophia knew that this moment marked the beginning of a new journey, not just for her, but for so many women who needed help. As Sophia approached Eleanor, she noticed the tension in her mother's expression. It was a mix of responsibility and empathy, a reflection of the unconditional love that defined her as a mother. "We're doing the right thing, aren't we, Mom?" Sophia asked softly, knowing the pressure on Elena was great, but trusting completely in her vision and strength. Elena looked up, her gaze calm and steady. "Yes, Sophia, we are. Every case, every story that we help rewrite gives us the assurance that we're doing the right thing. This project isn't just about the house, it's about rebuilding lives, one mother at a time." Sophia smiled, feeling the weight of her mother's words, who had always known how to give to others what she had not had in her own life. She knew that the house, now renovated and transformed, was much more than a physical shelter. It was a place of healing, a refuge where mothers could find strength and hope, just as Elena and she had done. Meanwhile, the project took shape, and each new day brought new challenges. The media presence did not diminish, but Sophia and Elena were firm in their decision not to allow their story to be turned into a spectacle. They had a greater mission, something that went beyond the pain and scandal, but somehow they were also turning that pain into something positive. The work to help other women was just beginning, and supporting those who needed it most was the greatest legacy they could leave. Maria, ever attentive, saw the impact that the project was having not only on Eleanor and Sophia's lives, but also on those women who, like them, were trying to rewrite their own stories. Even Mercedes, who had initially resisted the project, was beginning to show signs that her words of disapproval had been left behind. Time was showing them a new way to connect with their past, without being afraid to change what needed to be changed. The house and the foundation, Mom, they help us see everything differently. It's not just our history, it's the legacy of each woman who is here, Sophia said, with the conviction of someone who was finally finding her place in the world alongside her mother. "Yes," Elena replied with a soft smile, "it's our chance to leave something positive for the future, something that helps to heal, that turns everything we've been through into a strength for others." Time passed, and as the foundation came to life, Sophia and Elena found themselves closer than ever. They were building something that could not be taken away, something that would grow beyond their own pain. Each day was a step closer to giving a new beginning to those who needed it most. The house by the sea, once a summer retreat, was now a symbol of renewal. The walls that had borne witness to so many secrets and fears were becoming a space of hope and opportunity, and Elena finally felt like she was living up to her true legacy. There was no longer shame, but instead the courage to redefine what it meant to be a Rivera, or to be a mother, or simply to be human. The work was far from over, but Elena knew deep in her heart that their future was brighter than she could have ever imagined. Elena looked at Ulysses with a soft smile, feeling the depth of his words. She didn't need any more validation, But the simple phrase was a silent acknowledgement that while there had been mistakes in the past, the transformation was real, and the pain had finally found its place in history. "She would be proud of all of us," Elena replied, her voice firm, but filled with a softness that only time and experience can bring. She looked at Sophia, who was now standing next to Ulysses, and felt a deep love for her daughter, for the journey they had made together. Paula, organizing the final details of the day, smiled when she saw the mothers so comfortable and welcomed. Each family that arrived there brought a story of struggle and overcoming, but also of renewed hope. As Eleanor had said, true power was in the love that sustains us and drives us forward. And that love, warm and unconditional, was permeating every corner of that house by the sea. Elena, with her daughter's hand in her hands, felt a deep satisfaction. They were not just mother and daughter, were witnesses that even in the worst adversities, love can overcome everything. The foundation was not just a house, but a manifestation of the power to transform pain into something meaningful. It wasn't about money or status, but about the courage to start over, to offer others what had once been given to her, a chance to rebuild herself. The house by the sea, now full of laughter and stories, seemed to shine more brightly under the starry sky. The end of one story was not the end, but the beginning of another. A new beginning for each person who found shelter there, and a new purpose for each person who brought their pain and hope within these walls. As the night fell, Eleanor looked at the faces around her and knew that with all her pain and joy, she had finally found her true purpose. Not just to reverse what was lost, but to create a legacy of hope and love. Zrania, which would extend far beyond that house. This story was amazing, right? So I ask you to leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell. By doing this, you will not miss any videos here on the channel. Until next time.